That's why I believe dinosaurs didn't live 65 million years ago, nor before humans were on the planet. If people have seen them, that just ends the conversation, doesn't it? The Bible records at least 2 instances of dinosaurs. Let me read to you one. From the book of Job, Job lived somewhere around 4,000 years ago. Here's what it says. Look at the behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. So here's God telling Job and his audience, look at this creature. Take a look. So it was there to look at. His tail sways like a cedar tree. Cedar is one of the biggest trees around. So he's comparing this thing's tail to a huge tree. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like rods of iron. This creature is so big, he can only compare its tail to a tree and its bones to tubes of iron. He ranks first among the works of God. When the river rages, he's not alarmed. He's secure. Though the Jordan should surge against his mouth. Now, of course, he's using some big language here to make a point. How many of you live in Tucson? You know these little washes we have, and these signs go up. Do not cross when water is present. And every year, somebody says, I can make it. And the water's only this deep. But it's going through at 30 miles an hour, and they putt across. Next thing you know it, the fire department comes and rescues them. A couple years ago, they made it what they call the idiot law. People got to pay now to get rescued because they don't listen to the sign. My point is, he's saying if the Jordan River ran into this creature's mouth, it wouldn't disturb him. Now, of course, he's exaggerating. But the point is, he's trying to let you know how big and powerful this creature is. The Jordan River, by the way, when it swells back in those days, a mile wide. He's saying this creature is so big, I can only compare its tail to a cedar tree, and its body to tubes of iron, and its mouth big enough to encompass a raging river. What do you call something with a tail as big as a tree and bigger than a house? We call them dinosaurs. That's what we call them. There's another passage in Job that talks about another creature called Leviathan, whose scales are so close together and so strong they can't pierce them with harpoons. Sounds like a terrible lizard to me. Can anyone capture him by the eyes or trap him and pierce his nose? This is one of the oldest books of the Bible. And there's a guy in there writing about dinosaurs. Oh yeah, but we don't believe the Bible. Fine, don't believe it. Where do you come up with that information then if it isn't real? See? It's there for all eyes to see. But there's more. Lots and lots more. Bring up my first picture. This engraving is called St. George and the Dragon. It's from Venice, Italy, from the year 1500. There's some written legends about knights going out in the area and conquering these fearsome dragons. Now, when we think of a dragon, we think of a thing with wings that breathes fire and attacks hobbits. Another word for dragon is lizard. That's just the English language. We call dinosaurs terrible lizards. That's where the name comes from. This is a relief of a knight from the year 1500 fighting off a terrible lizard, which comes to mean dinosaur. Say, Steve, that doesn't look like any dinosaur I've ever seen before. Doesn't look like one I've ever seen before either, but St. George saw it. He killed it. He's famous for it. He rid the land of this terrible lizard. Now, maybe that picture doesn't do it for you. Let's take a look at the next one. Can you see that from where you're sitting? You in the back. Can you see that in the back? All right. Now, what if I were to tell you that wasn't made today after a huge paleontological dig when they discovered a dinosaur? What if I told you that was from the year 1496? It's a brass engraving on the tomb of Bishop Richard Bell in a Carlisle Cathedral in the United Kingdom. Looks exactly like an apatosaurus. Exactly. It is an apatosaurus. Now, why do you think Bishop Bell had that carved on his tomb? Question is, how did he even know what an apatosaurus was? This is 500 years before Darwin. I tell you how he knew, because he saw the thing. That's how he knew. The eyewitness account. Now let's move over to Sumatra. Next picture. This one down here. This is a hunting party hunting this thing. I don't know what you call that thing. Let me read you the description from the article from which I got it. The ancient Sumatrans produced multiple pieces of art depicting long-tailed, long-necked creatures with a head crest. Some of these animals resemble hadrosaurs. This particular work depicts a creature that bears a striking resemblance to Corythosaurus, which is being hunted by these ancient Indonesian peoples. No matter where you go on the planet, you find ancient artwork, pottery, reliefs, drawings, carvings that look like these things. Next one. This is my favorite, one of my favorites. This is a modern artist's rendition of a dinosaur, a specific one called an apatosaurus. This looks like that, would you not say? So this is what a modern dinosaur guy says an apatosaur looked like. This, which has apatosaurs with their necks wrapped around each other, let me read to you. The art is from a Mesopotamian cylinder dated 3300 BC. Sometime after Job, they were still alive, obviously. No matter where you go in the world, you dig these things up. In fact, when they dug up Nebuchadnezzar's palace, Nebuchadnezzar is mentioned in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when Israel was destroyed. He's the one that destroyed them, Judah. His palace has some long-necked, long-tailed creatures on it, too. He didn't make the cut for the presentation this morning. I had to limit the amount of pictures I showed you, but it was really cool to see it. It just didn't look as much as like a dinosaur as some of these other things do. Next picture. Can you see that in the back? When I was growing up, they called that a stegosaurus. I don't know. They always seem to be changing the names of dinosaurs nowadays. But that was the one with the big spiny things on its back. This is from an 800-year-old Cambodian temple. That's just carved all over the walls. That stegosaurus right there. It's all over the place. That's a close-up. I'm telling you, people can tell me the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. People carve them. How did this guy 800 years ago know to do that? He saw it. That's how he knew to do it. Now, that's 800 years ago. Can we get a little more current? Let's take a look. You probably can't see this. It's a cave drawing. And so somebody outlined the picture for us. That's the outline of the picture, the cave drawing. That comes from the United States, from an Anasazi Indian cave in Utah, dating as recent as 150 years ago, but they can't be sure. It might be as far as 1200 years ago. 1200 AD. They've dated it somewhere, again, they don't know dates very well. They just don't. But they figured somewhere between 1200 AD and 150 years ago. I know a guy. His family has several generations in Tucson. You know, they go back to the Indians. And he said, yeah, there was I think he said 150 years ago, there was this big winged reptile that people had to hunt down and kill because it was killing things. Just 100 years ago? 150 years ago? Like recently. And of course, there's no proof, there's no photographs, so it's like a legend out there with Bigfoot or the UFOs or Elvis being still alive. But this is beyond that, all this stuff I'm showing you. People were seeing these things. Now, here's my favorite. Next one. These are bone samples and tissue samples. How old would you say those bone and tissue samples are based on your looks? Based on the looks just here. By the way, these arrows, they're pointing to elastic pieces that actually are elastic still. When they pull them apart, they stretch and retract. How old would you say those samples are right there? Anybody who thinks they might be a year old or so, let me see your hands. Don't be embarrassed. I won't embarrass you. A week old. 1 to 10 years. 65 million years. Nobody with 65 million years with the red blood and the elastic tissue? None of you? One of you? Just cause, Steve. I knew you had to be it. That's a T-Rex. Those are samples from a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I didn't get this from a Christian website. I got this from a government science website. These are soft, red, they call these gooey fossils because they're still wet. Now you're going to tell me that if this T-Rex lived 65 million years ago, we dug it up and it's still wet, its fossils are still red and gooey and stretchy? I don't believe it. I'm not that gullible. I'm not. I'd put that at a week, a month, a year, 2 years. How it preserved 10, 20, 150 years, I'll never know. But I'm certainly not going back to 65 million years. No stinking way. I don't believe it. I don't have enough faith to accept a theory like that. I just don't. The Bible says dinosaurs and people lived together. I believe it. I believe it because the Bible says so, and I believe the Bible.